You have meddled with the primal forces of nature, Mr. Beale, and I won't have it. Is that clear? You think you merely stopped a business deal? That is not the case. The Arabs have taken billions of dollars out of this country, and now they must put it back. It is ebb and flow, tidal gravity. It is ecological balance. You are an old man who thinks in terms of nations and peoples. There are no nations. There are no peoples. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no West. There is only one holistic system of systems. One vast and immane, interwoven, interacting, multivariate, multinational dominion of dollars. Petrodollars, electrodollars, multi-dollars, Reichmarks, rims, rubles, pounds, and shekels. It is the international system of currency which determines the totality of life on this planet. That is the natural order of things today. That is the atomic and subatomic and galactic structure of things today. And you have meddled with the primal forces of nature. And you will atone. Am I getting through to you, Mr. Beale? You get up on your little 21-inch screen and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today. What do you think the Russians talk about in their councils of state? Karl Marx? They get out their linear programming charts, statistical decision theories, Minimax solutions, and compute the price-cost probabilities of their transactions and investments, just like we do. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business, Mr. Beale. It has been since man crawled out of the slime. And our children will live, Mr. Beale, to see that perfect world in which there's no war or famine, oppression or brutality. One vast and ecumenical homeland for whom all men will work to serve a common profit, in which all men will hold a share of stock, all necessities provided, all anxieties tranquilized, all boredom amused. And I have chosen you, Mr. Beale, to preach this evangel.
Why me?
Because you're on television, dummy. 60 million people watch you every night of the week, Monday through Friday.
I have seen the face of God.
You just might be right, Mr. Beale.
Walk the human waste of flesh and bone off this planet! I pray to you, God, to kill these fucking people!
20, 21, sunshine, on a kick, drum, kick, drum, 20, 21, sunshine, on a kick, drum, kick, drum, 20, 21, sunshine, on a kick, drum, drum, 20, 21, sunshine, on a kick, drum, drum, 20, 21, sunshine, on a kick, 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 drum, 20, 21,
Everything you do, it's been done before. Everything you say, yeah, you said that yesterday. Everything you do, it's been done before. Everything you say, yeah, you said that yesterday. Everything you do, it's been done before. Everything you say, yeah, you said that yesterday. Everything you do, it's been done before. Everything you say, yeah, you said that yesterday. Everything you do, it's been done before. Everything you say, yeah, you said that yesterday. Everything you do, it's been done before. Everything you say, yeah, you said that yesterday. Everything you do, it's been done before. Everything you say, yeah, you said that yesterday. Everything you do, it's been done before. Everything you say, yeah, you said that yesterday. Everything you do, it's been done before. Everything you say, yeah, you said that yesterday. Everything you do, it's been done before. Everything you say, yeah, you said that yesterday. Everything you do, it's been done before. Everything you say, yeah, you said that yesterday. Everything you do, it's been done before. Everything you say, yeah, you said that yesterday.
To another edition of the Brownson Group. Today, we're going to be talking with Dr. E. Michael Jones, the author of a book called Libido Dominandi, Sexual Liberation and Political Control. Hello, Dr. Jones.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
All righty. This is one of the most powerful books I believe I've ever read because it puts into context a lot which has happened in our contemporary society, and it explains even more, as you're about to tell us, about the history of the West for the last 200 years. Now, one of the basic theses of your book here is the idea that sexual liberation could be used as a form of control, that it's at the very heart of the story of Samson and Delilah, which we remember from the Old Testament, goes way back, and that the idea that sin was a form of slavery was central to the writings of St. Paul. What is it? Sexual liberation, political control. What is it? Why is it relevant today? How do we see it now?
Well, it's one of the best forms of control because it's the subtlest, because it masquerades behind your passions. So what it is basically a manipulation of human passion. And human passion is powerful, and it blinds you to the fact that you're being manipulated. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that the culture is absolutely... now, this is a question, I don't know whether people are blind or whether we're talking about deliberate repression of people who understand the story, but the culture is absolutely adamant in not allowing any type of explanation of pornography along these lines. There is absolutely no discussion whatsoever along these lines. And so the only thing you're allowed to talk about is freedom. So people who, if you're against pornography, you're against freedom. This is the way the debate has been managed for over 50 years now. Let's say 50 years from the Roth decision.
Now, what was the Roth decision? That was...
It was just an obscenity decision that basically opened the floodgates to pornuppornography in 1957.
Pornography, free sex, sexual
because up until this time, pornography had never been considered a First Amendment issue, and obscenity was never considered First Amendment, and this was the opening of the door to allow pornography to be considered a First Amendment freedom of speech issue.
So sexual license, then free sex, free love, whatever you want to call it, then becomes an issue of freedom. It becomes an issue of liberation in the dominant culture.
Yeah. So in order to really understand it, the real dynamics of it, you have to take a step back and you have to look for examples. And I think the best example that I can come up with was the instance of the Intifada, the battle between the Israelis and the Palestinians. In 2002, the Israeli military force marched into Ramallah. And after they did that, they took over the TV stations, which is pretty much standard procedure. But after they did that, something unusual happened.
What was that?
They started broadcasting pornography over the TV stations.
Oh, they're liberating them.
Well, this leads you to a question of, well, why were they doing that? Now, I've mentioned this in talks I've given in Europe and Africa and in the United States. And in two of those three instances, there were Palestinians in the audience who came up to me and said that they were there when it happened and told me details about it that I didn't know. For example, that there were snipers on the roof of the hospital in town, and they imposed a curfew, and if you went out, you got shot. So you had to stay in the house, and then when you stayed in the house, the only source of information you had was the television, and the television is now broadcasting pornography. First one station, and then basically all three. All the stations but one got taken over, and the one station that didn't get taken over broadcasting, well, there's little bands across the bottom of the screen that they've been taken over by the Israelis, and they're broadcasting pornography. So, this is not something we're doing. It's out beyond our control. So the question is, why did they do that? And if you go to the American contemporary culture and you look for an explanation for the purpose or the reason for pornography or what pornography means, there were two fairly recent cultural artifacts that explain it for you. The one is called The People versus Larry Flynt, Hollywood movie, and the other one was called Boogie Nights. And both of these appeared around the early 90s, and they appeared at that particular time for a particular reason. That's because at that time Congress was debating something called the Communications Decency Act, which was whether to allow pornography on the Internet. And this was the pornography industry's cultural offensive to make sure that they were allowed to use the Internet to distribute pornography. So you go to a movie like The People versus Larry Flynt, and Woody Harrelson, for some reason, they picked him to play Larry Flynt. I don't know I guess Jabba the Hutt was had other obligations at that time. But anyway, they got him to play it, and during the course of the movie, he says that no one is free in this country unless I'm allowed to produce pornography. And so that's pretty much the explanation. Pornography equals freedom. So if we take that explanation and we apply it to what happened in Ramallah, it's pretty clear that the Israelis were trying to bring freedom to the Palestinians.
Well, but your book and your thesis is that that's really just a euphemism for a very sophisticated form of slavery.
Well, I think anybody in his right mind knows that the Israelis are not interested in liberating the Palestinians unless we take liberation in a contemporary cultural sense, and so you have to look someplace else for the explanation. And I'm saying the real explanation can be found in places like, the story of Samson and Delilah in the Bible, which is also set in Gaza. So nothing has changed in that regard.
So the idea is to get people to watch pornography or accept pornography, whether it's in the United States or anywhere else. Once they start doing that, then their passions will determine how they live their lives.
Yeah.
And the people who present the pornography will make money because people will want to feed their passions, and as these industries make more money, they'll be able to exert more influence on the society.
Right. That's pretty much the explanation. So to begin with our example, everyone's supposed to be distracted from the fact that the Israelis have just taken over your town because all you're going to do is watch pornography now. And that's pretty much what the Shin Bet and the CIA had in mind when this thing was proposed in the first place. So I think that makes pretty clear that that's the military application of pornography. It's a weapon in cultural warfare, and the group that controls the pornography ultimately ends up controlling the mind of the country where they have settled in. And so what you see here is that the same thing happened in the United States in a less dramatic fashion over the course of the 1960s.
The work of Dr. John Calhoun at the National Institute of Health in Washington, D.C. has attempted to answer this question. In a unique experiment that took years to complete, Dr. Calhoun used white mice to study population growth and its effects on individual behavior. In addition to his renowned research papers, he has recorded some of these observations on film. In this 16-cell mouse habitat, utopian conditions of nutrition, comfort, and housing were provided for a potential population of over 3,000 mice. Yet, in spite of ideal conditions, the mouse population met with catastrophe. Individuals were kept track of by color markings on their fur. Factors which normally control population growth, such as predation by owls or cats, were eliminated. Transmissible disease was also reduced. In effect, the mouse universe simulated the present situation of a continually expanding population of humans. To see how Dr. Calhoun's mouse universe grew, we'll use the familiar population graph again. Within the first 100 days, the mice went through the period Dr. Calhoun called strive. This was a period of adjustment. Territories were established, and nests were made. The next period lasted about 250 days. The population of the mice doubled every 60 days. This was called the exploit period. The use of resources became unequal. Although each living unit was identical in structure and opportunities, more food and water was consumed in some areas. As the population increased, most mice associated eating and drinking with the presence of others, and crowding developed in certain units. The third period, consisting of 300 days, found the population of mice leveling off. This was called the equilibrium period. Dr. Calhoun noticed that the newer generations of young were inhibited, since most space was already socially defined. At this time, some unusual behavior became noticeable. Violence became prevalent. Excess males strived for acceptance, were rejected, and withdrew. Huddling together, they would exhibit brief flurries of violence among themselves. The effects of violence became increasingly visible. Certain individuals became targets of repeated attack. These individuals would have badly chewed and scarred tails. Other young mice growing into adulthood exhibited an even different type of behavior. Dr. Calhoun called these individuals the beautiful ones. Their time was devoted solely to grooming, eating, and sleeping. They never involved themselves with others, engaged in sex, nor would they fight. All appeared as a beautiful exhibit of the species, with keen, alert eyes and a healthy, well-kept body. These mice, however, could not cope with unusual stimuli. Though they looked inquisitive, they were, in fact, very stupid. Dr. Calhoun called the last period the die phase, leading the population into extinction. Although the mouse utopia could house 3,000, the population began to decline at 2200. In the shift from the equilibrium to the die phase, each animal became less aware of associates, despite all animals being pushed closer together. Dr. Calhoun concluded that the mice could not effectively deal with the repeated contact of so many individuals. The evidence of violence increased to the point where most individuals had had their tails bitten to some degree. Eventually, the entire mouse population perished. Dr. Calhoun's experiment is a classic example of a typical population and its growth when left unchecked. Research in this area continues under his supervision. Currently, Dr. James Hill has taken the basics of the Calhoun experiment to study social behavior even more closely. In his experiment, rats are used instead of mice. Healthy individuals are selected to start the population. The rats are anesthetized so that Dr. Hill can perform a minor operation necessary to the success of his experiment. A small electromagnetic encapsulated device is implanted into every rat. This small unit enables sensing devices to keep track of the movement and position of each individual in the population. After surgery, the rats are introduced to their new, multi-leveled home, all at the same time. The rats immediately begin to explore their new environment, prior to organizing territories and nesting. Dr. Hill will trace how individuals move about in crowded situations. This movement is followed by tubular sensing devices. Every time a rat enters or passes through a tube, the unit detects and registers its presence. This constant movement is monitored by computer. Nesting activity is also studied. Dr. Hill has observed that the larger the population, the less care a mother gives to her nest and young. The same type of individuals that resulted in the mouse utopia are also emerging in the rat population. There are aggressives, asocial, and outcasts. Though these studies use animals, the findings about population growth and individual behavior are being closely compared to our own human population. Like all populations that have existed on this planet, many researchers believe that the human race has reached a crucial point in the exploit phase, a point where important decisions must be made and careful planning implemented if we are to survive. The study of plant and animal populations helps us to make decisions about the future of our human population, so that we may maintain our own balance with nature.